Right, it has now started recording. Okay, so just for the benefits of people listening into this, in the normal run of things, I talk the camera to death for 45 minutes with a spiel for the Suffolk Jungian Circle. Carol is doing the spiel today, but is not quite as techno what's it as I am, which is saying something because I'm practically a Luddite. So, um, to circumvent technological problems, we're doing this as an interview rather than as a talking heads to camera.
Yeah.
So, hello, Carol.
Hello. I think actually this does make a bit of a change.
It does shakes it up a bit.
It does shake it up a bit. Yeah. I was thinking today perhaps somebody else might like to be interviewed by you at some future point. That might be an idea.
Could be the start of a new fad. So the topic of today's the topic of today's talk is the book, the Red Book, Liber Novus, by Carl Jung, which Carol was showing to the screen there. We're just going to go for a few questions. Could you start us off, Carol, by giving a little bit of background as to when he wrote it and the kind of history of the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is quite a bit of history to the book, which I'll try not to. I mean, the whole scenario or context and of the Red Book is quite intense, and there's quite a lot there. I mean, no doubt people will have already perhaps ventured into looking at the Red Book, but basically, Jung wrote the Red Book between about 1913 to about 1930, which was quite a considerable time. I mean, a lot of information that I've gathered is not just from the Red Book, but also from where he does give an account of a very brief account of, of the Red Book in his Memories, Dreams, Reflections. So I have dipped into that as well. And by all accounts, he didn't continually write. It was on and off, on and off. The Red Book really came about from, as to say, his encounter with the unconscious, or the collective unconscious. And it's a series of writings and jottings that he did initially do in the Black Books. So, and then he brought them all together, and he placed them. They were actually unfinished, and he did place them in his study, in his drawer in his study, for many, many years, which I'll probably come back to a bit later. To bring us up to date, really, Sonu Shamdasani, let me get my tongue around that, with permission from the family, actually then brought about the editing and the publishing of the book in around 2000, I think. Correct me if I'm a bit wrong. It's thought that Jung did not really want his book to be published. The writings and the paintings that he did as well, which were, quite extraordinary. And he even considered, somebody even said to him once, about him being an artist, and he denied it and said, no, I'm not an artist, but he clearly was, and clearly enjoyed doing his paintings. So really that's just the beginnings in a nutshell, really. I mean, I can probably go into it a bit more as we go along.
Okay. Is there anything that Shanu kind of sets out as the sort of the setting for the book?
I mean, Shamdasani, a very professional man, very knowledgeable about Carl Jung. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think that the Red Book would have even come to light, as the family were quite reluctant to begin with about bringing the book out for publishing. I mean, in the book, the first half of the book is really a preface, and that was written by, and I can't even, I'll try and pronounce his name. The preface was written by Ulrich Honey, and he was from the foundation of the works of C.G. Jung. And he actually gave a very good breakdown in the preface. So I'll quickly go through that, and then I'll go on a bit to talk about Shamdasani. Yeah, the as I said, the book was the writings were started in 1913, and they were pivotal for Jung. It begins with a self-experimentation, as he called it, that was around the confrontation with the unconscious, which he was able to access by way of what he called active imagination. And as I say, this went on over the years until 1930. He described this episode of his life, or of the experiment, to get to the bottom of things, and he actually did say that is in the Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and it was about his inner processes, which was around to translate the emotions into images, as well as writing. And this was to enable him to grasp the fantasies which were stirring underground, again, as he put it. So, he recorded, he revised it, he added to it, he reflected upon his writings, and he actually then copied them into a calligraphic script. So the actual book was mostly written with this calligraphic script, which, if you see a copy of the original, it's quite a big one. We've mentioned it before in the past, and it is really a lovely script. Jung, throughout this time, did not mention to his family about these close encounters, other than his wife. Which in MDR he did explain that, and also given in the preface, this chap called his name I can't remember now said that for some reason he didn't want to upset his children. He didn't want them to know what was going on, but he did share it with some colleagues and some of the when he used to do some of the seminars that he gave and lectures that he gave. He briefly mentioned it, but he never really said very much. And now, with hindsight, that there did seem to be a bit of an aura of mystery around this. Yeah, it's to say it was not. Yeah, the insights that he gained from his encounters with the unconscious, directly, with hindsight now, I suppose, and with his knowledge and moving forward, did inspire him and did inform his subsequent writings, and is well thought of. And he even said that it was the basis of everything that was to come for him. As I said, it was first published in around, I don't know if it was 1999, 2000. He declared that he didn't want it published, as they were more biographical, really. But he just wanted his family. He did hand it over to his family. However, he allowed quotes and excerpts to be written in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And he did publish himself the Sermons to the Dead that did form part of the Red Book. which I certainly wasn't aware of, and I've not read that either. I've heard it's quite a little bit spooky. In 1961, he passed away, and his literary estate property was left to his descendants. He expressed, though, in his will that he would really like it to remain with his family and not be published. And because he had written that in his will, you know, his family did abide by that, and it was left dormant for many years because it was considered a private matter. So no one approached the family until I think obviously they knew about it, because I'm thinking, how did they know about it? You know, they must have. And then it was put in a safe deposit box, and there it lay until Sonu Shamdasani came along. And after the publication in 1990 of the collected works of Carl Jung, thoughts turned to the Red Book and possible publication. And they did approach the family. And in the end, you know, they did allow a collaboration with Shamdasani. Now, Shamdasani says in his introduction, which is the next part of the book, that it, you know, he called it Liber Novus, and the Red Book Liber Novus was divided up into 3 books: Liber Primus, the way of what is to come. The second book was Liber Secundus, the images of erring. And the third book is Liber Teritus. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And that he called the Scrutinies. Shamdasani went on to say that the Liber Novus is of critical importance in his view, and it's significant for grasping the emergence of Jung's new model of psychotherapy. He considered the presence of mythological fantasies to be signs of loosening of the psychogeneric layers of the unconscious, and was indicative of possible schizophrenia. He radically revised this position to what he now considered critical was not the particular content. Sorry if I'm reading from my notes, but I have to keep looking. But the attitude of the individual towards it. And whether an individual would or could accommodate such material in their worldview. Liber Secundus presents a critique of contemporary psychiatry, highlighting its capacity to differentiate between religious experience and divine madness, as he termed it, from psychopathology. I mean, how you can interpret that, you know, is open, you know, to discussion and debate. You know, I thought he developed new conceptions of the aims and methods of psychotherapy. Instead of the treatment for nervous disorders or neuroses, it became a practice for fostering what Jung came to call the individuation process, whereby rather than treating someone maybe who was experiencing voices or was experiencing seeing things or visions, that rather than treat it maybe as Freud would have done, as a way of a pathology, that it was more you know, an unconscious process that could be part of the individuation process. So it had far-reaching consequences for analytical psychology, but also for psychotherapy. So that's what, in a nutshell, there's far more. The introduction by Shamdasani is quite long, it's quite involved, it's quite extensive, and there's no way would, I think, even for this short interview we're doing, Robin, would we, you could do a whole course on the Red Book and pull apart even what Shamdasani's got to say in the introduction. But I do think that the introduction by him is a good lead up into what can be quite a complicated and quite, I don't know, it's quite hard to understand, Jung's sort of like thought processes. So anyway.
Okay. Well, you've covered nicely what it's about.
Brief.
Is there anything particular that you feel you get from having read through the book, or you feel would kind of inspire other people?
Yeah, I think basically, I must admit, I haven't read it all. I've read bits of it, and thinking about it and pondering things and talking with Greg, bless him, bouncing ideas and thoughts with him. I sort of liken it to, for me, I liken it to more of a map, because Jung did say about the Red Book that, and he has said elsewhere in his writings, that we are all subject to our own experiences. And I think particularly with the Red Book, I think they were his experiences. They were personal to him. They were individual to him. So I think maybe that might have been another perhaps discussion point, is that I think he thought that that was a reason why he didn't want it published, because it was a record of his experiences. So, and he did say, that people have their own experiences. They should be able to, if they have that type of experience, that that is theirs. It's personal to them. And I thought, well, yeah, that is a good point. And I thought, well, maybe for me, the Red Book is more of a map, more of a guide. So the map isn't the territory. The territory is yours if you happen to experience something like that. And I think, looking back to the past, other people have had their past and their experience with the unconscious, and a lot of them have been poets, writers, authors. And one I will spring to mind, who always springs to mind, is Coleridge and William Blake, when you really look at his work. Yeah. So I think, again, what do people question? How do people, what do they think that they could gain from it? Yeah.
Do you think he was trying to avoid people feeling that they had to emulate him?
Yeah, quite possibly. I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it's a bit of a tricky question, really, because it's a bit like, oh, well, that happened to me, or like him, that happened to him, so maybe that will happen to me, or this means that, or the symbols mean, or the metaphysics and the symbols and stuff that was coming out for him. People might not be able to relate to his experience or his symbology or his metaphysics, but if they experience their own, path or journey or experience, then there might be a better way for them to be able to have their individual experience in order for them to have their own, individuation process, if so to speak. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about him kind of confronting his own unconsciousness and images and the sensations and feelings that emerged from his unconsciousness. How did he go about doing that?
Right. I think I might have. Sorry, Robbie. Yeah, how did he go about it? Again, he described his experience of encountering, his unconscious, and one of the thoughts that has been sort of put across from other stuff that I have read is that he had a bit of a nervous breakdown. Sorry, what was your question again? Sorry, I've drifted right off there.
How he goes about confronting his unconsciousness.
Sorry. Yeah. I was going to take it back a bit because there are thoughts that he had a bit of a nervous breakdown, that he had a bit of a midlife crisis. And that led to him believing that the first half of life was actually, where you, as we've talked about before, where you learn about life, you go to work, you have your family, you set your goals. And then the second half of life is more about, questioning life, why are we here, etc. Going back to the breakdown, some people have suggested in the past that his breakup with Freud was a lot to do with it, because he appeared to go into a bit of a depressive state. He called it pressure in MDR. He does Memories, Dreams, Reflections. He does go into quite a bit of detail about how it came about, and he felt a lot of pressure. He had a series of dreams, and one of these dreams was around where he dreamt of blood, sea of blood coming across the country with mountains sticking out of it. And he pondered on this for quite some time. And this was about, beginning of 1913, 1914 coming up. And we know what happened in 1914. And he later said that it was a prophetic dream. But also, I think Shamdasani has mentioned that maybe it wasn't just about a prophetic dream, but also it was around the forthcoming turmoil that Jung would actually face before he actually dropped down. And that's how he described it. But prior to that, he started having fantasies. He was having a series of dreams, and he kept pondering on them, pondering on the fantasies. And then one day he was sitting in his office and he just dropped, he just dropped down into the unconscious. And then he referred to it as active imagination, where he found himself tumbling down into the darkness and then finding himself in the desert. And then he started encountering different people who he spoke to. One of them was Philemon. And then there was Salome, Elijah, and various other historical people. People from the Bible came to light. Yeah. that's basically how it happened.
So journaling seems to be a key factor there, isn't it? Kind of keeping track of the dreams and the visions and the
Yes, yes, yeah.
experiences, so you can reflect back on them
Yeah,
in future.
I think that's he didn't actually. He didn't actually say that. He didn't actually say. But if you think about it, yeah, that must have been what he was doing, was journaling about it. And because I mean, how often we sort of told, if you have a series of dreams or if you have dreams, then write them down, particularly if they seem to be quite significant. But also, I did miss out, actually. He did start to play. He started to play with some of his, I don't know where he got them from, he didn't say, but he started to play with his childhood blocks of wood that he had. Yeah. And he sat and played with them for hours on end. He'd go and see his patients, and he would talk to them, and and he sort of came to the conclusion at this time that how can I help people if I don't really know what it is they're saying to me, but unless I experience that. And then he'd come home and he'd have his dinner, and then he would play with these bricks, and build things. And he built a village in the end, a village and a town. And he was almost saying in Memories, Dreams, Reflections that it was that getting back to sort of childhood. And also maybe, I mean, these are my thoughts now, that maybe his innocence, the innocence of childhood, allowed him to perhaps, I don't know, get over his ego, if you like, which is, what we build, I suppose, as we get older. And somehow he bypassed that. I don't think he ever sort of said, well, this is the technique, this is how you do it. But yeah, he does give quite a good explanation.
Worked for him.
It worked for him, yeah. But I think also as well, I think it must have been I think he was fairly frightened by it. He was fairly scared by it, I think. And I think in amongst it was he does mention Nietzsche quite a lot, because I think, Nietzsche had a similar experience, and Nietzsche went mad. And I think Freud, whatever made me say that? Oh,
Parapraxis.
Yeah. But I think Jung was sort of well aware of that. I think he was well aware of that, of the melee, as he put it. The melee of the deep unconscious. I mean, it's bad enough when we have a nightmare, isn't it? We have a dream where we're confronted by something. Ooh, no, thank you. But I think he confronted it, you see, and I think that's the word, isn't it? Confrontation with the unconscious. And we can't help but want to go there, really. Another point for debate.
Speaking of scary things, and just as a point to finish on, when we have our discussion group with the Suffolk Jungian Circle, it'll be April 23rd. If anyone wants a link, do leave a message. Which, of course, April 23rd is St. George's Day, and the confrontation between George and the dragon. So is there anything kind of dragon related we can shoehorn in here as a segue to the date?
Yeah, I suppose we can before we finish. Yes, when you said that, I thought, oh yes, how interesting, how spooky is that? So I did go and have a little look, and I thought, oh, yeah, there'll be dragons. Jung did write a lot. Jung did write about dragons. I think he did amongst the whole of his collected works. And I think if you went hunting for the dragon, you're going to find him, because I think he thought of the dragons as lurking in the deep, dark depths of the unconscious. I'll read a quote. He said in the Red Book, the serpent, he referred to, it was interchangeable between serpent and dragon, and I think he recognized that the serpent or dragon was quite a very archaic and old alchemical symbol. And then you've got the along with the snake, with the serpent, the serpent, snake, dragon eating the tail, uberus, which is another point. But anyway, he wrote, the serpent is the earthly essence of man, of which he is not conscious. Its character changes according to people and lands, since it is the mystery that flows to him from the nourishing Mother Earth. That's what he says there. Then, my friends, it is wise to nourish the soul. And as Shamdasani said in his introduction, that he felt that Jung was searching for his soul, that he'd lost his soul. And by going into the unconscious, that was what he was searching for. And carrying on. Otherwise, you will breed dragons and devils in your heart. And that's Red Book, page 232. Also, if he waits long enough, one sees how the gods all change into serpents and underworld dragons. In the end, there is also the fate, that is also the fate of the Logos. And in the end, it poisons us all. So he does quite a lot to say. I've written down, if people want to go and have a look, he mentions it in pages 280, 242, 318, 283, 287 and 280. People want to go and have a look. So yes, that's all about dragons.
Excellent. So plenty of discussion there. We're going to definitely have to talk about dragons on St. George's Day. And
Yeah, definitely.
Especially that idea of the gods becoming dragons, of maybe the light becoming dark.
Yeah, I'd not really come across that before at all. I just think that, let me have a look here, just playing before we come to this. Yeah, just a quote here. His feelings. Yeah, saying he'd I think basically, I think the Red Book from our point of view, I mean, there's a lot in there. There is a lot in there. And I think, going back to what we were saying earlier, I mean, you can take from it what you want, really. If you want it to be a novel, some people have said it's a novel. Some people have said it's a hero's journey. If you want it to relate to yourself, then yeah, but by all means, but I think the emphasis for him, the emphasis for him was that it was his, and it was individual to him. But yeah, I mean, there's some things possibly that we can take from the Red Book, and I'm sure we're going to have a good, healthy debate when we meet up.
Well, it's a good point to finish on. Thank you very much, Carol.
Yes, no, thank you, Robin. Thank you for suggesting this. Yes, I'm not very tech savvy. So yeah, thank you. Thank you. See you soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.